Welcome back. Joining us now are Montgomery College history professors Alonzo Smith and John Rydell. And still with us from the first segment is Felicia Bell of the United States Capitol Historical Society. And we've had a great discussion with you so far about the exhibit From Freedom's Shadow, looking at the role of African Americans in the U.S. Capitol. And Felicia, before we turn to our esteemed faculty, we're going to get to you there in just a minute, Alonzo and John, I wanted to ask you, as the curator of the exhibit, you know, what were some of those wow facts that really jumped out that amazed you as you were doing your research? And as I say that, I'll give you an example. As I was taking a look at some of the things in the exhibition, it was surprising to me to read that there was once a time in the 19th century when the state of Mississippi had 2 sitting U.S. senators who were African American. I had no idea, for example, of that type of fact. What worked for you in terms of wow? Wow.
The wow moments, I think, was just the whole hiring out system. I think was, I mean, I knew about it, but when I actually saw those receipts of owners of enslaved people, you know, requesting the commissioners for payment. For their enslaved people who were hired out, and then the receipts from where they were paid. And just, I mean, there are so many of these. And just holding them and going through them, and instances where an owner's child was sent to get the pay. Instances where women were hiring out enslaved people to the Capitol. So that was something that really, and also the receipts that I saw for alcohol purchased for the laborers at the Capitol, and the whole role of alcohol. That was another aha moment.
That's
for
a scary
me
notion.
as well.
And I think
yes.
you used the terms that construction in the pre-OSHA days.
Yes.
This takes it to the
absolutely
the worst possible extremes.
And you know, that was another challenging issue for me, and I struggled with that. I was very frustrated with researching that, and you know, here it is. I'm trying to tell this story to the public. And then I have these enslaved men drinking on the site, and where the alcohol was purchased for them. And then I read and I learned more about how enslaved men were hired out and working in other aspects, you know, other places besides the Capitol. And alcohol is commonplace. Alcohol and labor go hand in hand, you know, for a long time. So that was a little, because I didn't want them to spend their money on the alcohol, and they were, you know, but there's a whole concept behind that. But that was something that I struggled with. Another aha moment, of course, was the story of Philip Reed and the Statue of Freedom, and how he was involved in casting the bronze on the Statue of Freedom, and the irony of that. Here you have an enslaved man playing a major role with this statue that is on top of the Capitol Dome. And I just thought, you know, it was ironic. It was just an amazing story, and something that visitors would be able to remember and take away from the exhibit.
Consistent with that, Benjamin Banneker's challenge to the concept of all men are created equal.
Yes, yes.
Can't look at that dome in
yes.
the same way anymore now that you know that story.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the purpose of this exhibit. I think that we want people to think of the Capitol differently when they go through the Capitol, when they take a tour. Not to think of it in a negative light, but just now you know a little bit more than you did before, and now you may look at certain aspects of its architecture a little differently, or when you look at some of these huge blocks of stone, you may think about the labor that was involved, and not just the Capitol, but other significant buildings throughout America, and the labor that was involved in constructing these buildings. I think we tend to take a top-down, elitist approach when we're talking about buildings and history in general, but we always tend to think about the architect, and we don't think about the workers, the laborers who built these structures. So.
Professors, I want to ask you about wow moments, because I'm sure every day in your classrooms your students have them, or maybe you're surprised on the other end about what they do and don't know. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the surprises that you find as you're teaching this history. Either one.
You start.
Well, I find that generally students know very little about African American history. Coming into a course in it, they learn certain touchstones in the public school system, but that's really it. And so they really start fresh, and in the course of the semester, their eyes are opened. And when you were talking, Felicia, I thought about this, Philip Reed and constructing the statue, and really that point is the larger point about Black people's role in the whole country, really, right. Which is the constructing the wealth and the success that goes to other people. And so the wealth of the plantation owners in the South, the wealth of textile mill owners in the North, where that cotton is coming from the South to create industrialization in the North. So really, Black people, often unnamed, unlike Philip Reed, because we don't know their identities, we don't know almost nothing about them, but it's these people's labor and blood and sweat that really built this nation, not just the capital, but the whole nation.
Alonzo, you have done so much teaching in this field of African American history, and before the show we were talking, and you're a native DC resident yourself, and I think a lot of the history here that is being wrought through this exhibit is the role of the United States Capitol, but it's also very relevant to the people who are from this region, who need to understand the roots here. What was some of the parts that helped you as a professor in sort of using this as a teaching tool when the exhibit came here?
Well, one of the things that struck me that Felicia pointed out very clearly was the segregation that existed in the Capitol building, which I remember since I attended segregated schools when I was growing up. So I have a very clear memory of that, and I think that was one of probably the most telling and penetrating parts of the exhibition.
And I think our students sometimes, they think about that period as a really long time ago, but that's in our world today.
In their world, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
For some of us, it wasn't quite so long ago.
Yes.
But showing that picture of Oscar DePriest, who was U.S. Congressman from Chicago, pointing to the places where Black people couldn't eat, which was of course true on all the buildings, the Supreme Court, the Library of Congress, and all of those buildings downtown, as well as the retail stores. I mean, that in addition to the story of slavery, there's also the story of segregation. So I think that was a very valuable, addition.
And really, in both those ways, Washington, D.C. really was a southern city.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
situated between the slaveholding states of Maryland and Virginia. I mean, there was actually political machinations to get the capital placed within the South.
Right. That's right.
And so, it really was part of the South, and slaveholders looked at defending slavery in the nation's capital as critical to keeping slavery in the nation. And the counterpoint to that is that Northern anti-slavery activists, Black and white, saw fighting slavery in D.C. as critical to ending slavery in the nation.
That's right.
So D.C. really was kind of a central battleground between these forces throughout the period before the Civil War.